Good evening, viewers. This is Riyaz Aziz, and the program is Journalist Insight. Today, with me in the program Journalist Insight is Jose Carlos. He is the president of Macau Portuguese and English Press Association. I want to talk to him, and I want to discuss with him many issues, many international issues facing journalists. Thank you very much, Mr. Jose. You gave us
My
time.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
First of all, we'd like to know about you. What are you? How did you start work? Where did you start journalism, and so on?
Well, I'm currently 38 years old. I was born in Portugal. I started out my career in Portugal as a college student. I was back then working, I shall say, on a voluntary basis for sure, for a college radio and also a college newspaper while I was doing my bachelor studies in journalism. Then I graduated and I worked for a few months in Lisbon for a national news radio before I had this opportunity, a job opportunity of coming to Macau to join Macau's public service broadcaster.
That's very good. In a very short age, you have done many things. It's great. It's great.
Yes.
So, how did you become the president of Macau Portuguese English Press Association?
When I arrived in Macau back in 2003, as I was saying, I came to work for the public service broadcaster, the radio station. Then I moved on to the TV station under the same company. And since March this year, I left the public service broadcaster and I joined the private newspaper and media group. And I'm the editor-in-chief of this newspaper. Well, when I arrived in Macau, as I was saying, there was no journalist association for non-Chinese, meaning there were some journalist groups, but they were Chinese-speaking associations and unions. And we thought, there was already a significant number of non-Chinese journalists working in Macau, non-Chinese speaking, namely Portuguese, and we thought that it was about time to set up an organization, and that's when we launched the Macau Portuguese and English Press Association. That was in 2005. I'm one of the founding members, and I've been serving in the governing bodies since basically the very beginning. And last year, after serving for 6 or 7 years in the board of directors as a director, I was encouraged to run for president by my colleagues, and that's how I became the president of the board of the Macau Journalists Association.
Okay, I have many questions regarding this association. Just tell me, are you an elected president of this association?
Yes, our association has about 80 to 90 members, and we have elections. So we have a 2-year term for the governing bodies, and we have elections. So the governing bodies are elected by the members of the association.
How many members are there in your association?
So currently overall about 90, and active members 70.
It is total number of journalists you have.
Yes.
They are all foreigners?
Not all foreigners. I mean, we have local Chinese members, but the majority are non-Chinese speaking. But we accept all. I mean, in our charter, all are welcome. So despite the name Portuguese and English Press Association, we do not discriminate against any background. We accept all. It just happens that the languages we use are in our communication and work are English, most and primarily Portuguese, Portuguese is the main language, and also English, because Portuguese is an official language in Macau, alongside Chinese. Of course, our aim is to become trilingual and to have more and more Chinese-speaking members in the future. So we can be stronger together. Our main purpose is to stand for press freedom, individual liberties and access to information, as well as ethics and professional training. These are the main areas of our activity.
One thing is very important to know for me. It is how you work when the Chinese government is said to be a communist government, and in the communist system, do you have freedom of expressions?
So we are very lucky because we live in Macau, and Macau and Hong Kong are special administrative regions. So the system is different. The legal system is different. The political system is different. The economic system is different. So we have a basic law, which is a mini constitution, where press freedom and freedom of expression are enshrined. We don't have censorship in Macau and Hong Kong. So we are not under the same rules as our colleagues are across the border in mainland China.
What do you think journalist should be a political activist, or he should not carry any political agenda?
Well, that's a good question. Well, a journalist has the right to endorse candidates and to express his views, of course. My personal view is that a journalist is more credible if he keeps some distance from political activism. So my personal view is that a journalist should not be manipulated neither by governments nor by political activism. So this does not mean that a journalist does not have values and should not espouse those values and fight for key and core values. And these are the core values of our job and our profession: freedom of speech, press freedom, access to information. But this does not mean and should not be in the way that we are political activists. We are journalistic activists. So we may have some activism to stand for these core values. But I think we are more effective and more credible if we have our own voice, which is independent from any power, political, economic, or other vested interests. So this is very, very important. The most valuable currency is credibility, honesty, and we have to be transparent. So it's our duty to do that. So then we can demand the same from the different powers. So I think this is a key point.
One more question. In the same scenario, I want to know, democracy is the basic system which gives freedom to everyone. Should a journalist go for democracy, or should he struggle for democracy?
Well, I think if he believes that's the case, yes, of course. I mean, there's a link between democracy and press freedom and freedom of expression and access to information. But we should also take into account the following. Democracy is not one size fits all. It's not the recipe that should be applied equally in the same way to all countries. Each country has its own path towards democracy. So democracy, this is my viewpoint, of course.
Yeah, I know. I want to know your viewpoint.
I believe that in order to attain a more representative system, in order to ensure individual freedoms and press freedom, it's not necessary that you will follow like a sort of copy and paste a system that is used in other countries. My point is that there is a way and a path for democracy and for respect for human rights, that each country, and it has to be followed by each country, and the peoples of each country are the ones, the citizens of each country are the ones that are the driving force, and they are the ones who should lead the way. So, so I think to answer your question, I can see a clear link between democracy and freedom of expression, of course, and the press freedom. But because you have democracy, electoral democracy, that is not a sufficient condition for you to have press freedom and to have rule of law. You see, many countries nowadays, you have elected leaders who are enemies of freedom, enemies of rule of law, and enemies of liberal values or of press freedom.
My question is about the system. The system, I mean to say, where there is no democracy, like kingdoms. You cannot speak, you cannot express your feelings. But in democracy, you can express your feelings, you can speak frequently and freely. That is what I'm asking. I understand that. I have just interviewed a person from Denmark. He is the president of Denmark Press Association. And he told me that the government is democratic, but it is reducing the media. It is just pressing the media as much as it can. So
Yes.
you're right. You're right. The democracy is not. If the government is democrat or the elected government, it is not necessary. It will favor freedom of expression, freedom of press. I agree with that. But I asked the question in context of kingdoms and non-democratic countries or dictatorships.
Sure. Well, that is that is easier for me to answer for sure. Democracy goes hand in hand with freedom of expression and press freedom.
Yeah,
I
you agree.
Yes.
My question was: should journalists go for a struggle for democracy?
Well, if he believes that that is his view, and yes, of course. But the thing is that what I believe that is important. Again, I get to the same point: is that it depends on the actual situation. There must be a, in some more dramatic situations, it is basically impossible not to take sides, right? But if the journalist can remain, as I was saying, while standing for these values, remain credible and having its own independent voice, which is not the voice of other powers, I think that is preferable. But again, let me tell you this: it all depends on what you're talking about, how oppressive the system is, and which is the most effective way to attain that goal. So I would respect the choices made by my colleagues in these countries and situations. They may believe that in the long term, to struggle for democracy may not be translated into activism on the following day, but to stay resilient in the longer term. So I respect all that, of course, because I need to understand the actual situation of the country and of the system, to have a view on specific situations. But in terms of system, yes, that would be my question for sure.
Where you are living, this is Macau. Macau is a country which is under the administration of Chinese government. But
Right.
You said there are rules are different. But
Yes.
at the end of the day, the government is not allowing many things to you to do. Is that true?
Not so much. I mean, the room is still satisfactory for us. But you see, this is a small place, and mainstream values and culture is sometimes not so prone to transparency, and the prevailing culture and values would not be so much of promoting conflict, even conflict of ideas and open conflict. So all these plays a role. Is a small place, It is there's a local culture, and there are some values in the society, and this is of course reflected in the kind of debate that you have. But if you ask me, to be fair, I would say the following: we do have a satisfactory room to operate, to report, but of course there are concerns and risks looming large with regards to tightening of the belt that may come. It is of course a concern.
Okay, if I ask my question in different way, same question. What is the level of censorship in your country? I mean, in Macau.
There is no censorship. Censorship in the sense of interference of the government to block content from being out, direct. I have no knowledge of that. But there's something else, which is self-censorship, and also, other ways of controlling the information, and for sure that does exist.
There is no censorship. Okay. Is there any pressure from government? Certainly comes from government to save the policies, to project the policies, to project the agendas. Do you feel any pressures?
Well, I do. Let me tell you this. I have to distinguish the following and to break down the following. The Chinese-speaking media and the Portuguese and English-speaking media. These are different realities.
Two different.
Yes, they are different because in Portuguese and English, and especially in Portuguese, you can read a lot of dissenting voices and critical voices and different views, and the airtime and the room and the space given to these voices in Chinese-speaking media overall, of course there are exceptions, is much less.
Okay.
So this is a fact. Now,
what is the ratio of Macau as far as the population is concerned, since it has been a colony of Portuguese? So what is the ratio of Portuguese in Macau?
It's not easy because we don't know for sure, but the impression that we have is that the number of European Portuguese like me, or local Portuguese, which are Asian Portuguese or Eurasian Portuguese or Macau-born Portuguese, overall you may be talking about perhaps 15,000. The overall population of Macau is 600,000.
So it comes only 15,000 as far as your population is concerned. It's just a rough estimate.
Rough estimate, yes. It's, I mean, it's it may be based on some census, but also on the impression that we have.
Okay.
We are not.
Next question. Generally, when associations and unions are formed, it means it will represent the collective representation, and it will be a trade union. Is it a trade union which enforces you to translate into an association?
Unfortunately, we don't have proper trade unions in Macau. So we don't have a trade union act, we don't have the right to go on strike regulated, and we don't have collective bargaining. That doesn't mean it's forbidden. It is actually mentioned in the basic law that these fundamental rights are to be observed and respected. But the problem is that the government and the General Legislative Assembly, they have yet to translate this into actual legislation, to legislate the role of trade unions, to legislate and perhaps to regulate the right to go on strike, and also to come up with a collective bargaining mechanism. So all this is not in place in Macau. So this means that our association, so you may have, I shall say, some associations may call themselves trade unions, but is a name, is not actually, they don't really work like a trade union works in many other places
Okay,
in the.
my question is, I will give you an example of Pakistan.
Mm.
In Pakistan, there is a trade union, there is a trade union law, act is there, but the implementation on that act is not, like it is just cipher. When a trade union is formed in any institution, any organization, media organization I am talking of, they will throw out that person who is trying to make trade union.
But that's
So
right.
I am talking in that context. Do you represent the people, your members, in that way? If he is thrown out of the job, do you protect them? Do you go for them for their help?
Oh, a good question. It goes like this. We are, we do, we may provide, of course, some support, taking into account our means. Have mechanism, because we are still a small we're a relatively small organization in our structure, to provide substantial help. But that is on our agenda to be able to better provide support. It is also a fact that here in Macau, fortunately, we don't have unemployment is not a major problem at all. Actually, you have a situation of full employment. But of course, working conditions are not ideal. So we will. It's part of our aim to strengthen our role in terms of labor rights. Yes, it is. It is important. But our main focus, as I was saying, our main focus has been on press freedom, advocacy, right to information, transparency. But of course, in order to have, it is very important to have stable and strong job conditions and sound, so journalists can truly perform their duty. Otherwise, they will fall prey to all the powers who want to weaken us.
Press freedom relates to the job. If there is no job, if a person thrown out of the job, what do you mean by press freedom? What does it stand for?
Well, it stands for, because as I was saying here, fortunately, we don't have major issues of unemployment. So we focus on press freedom. Press freedom stands for demanding authorities to provide information, stands for signaling, warning signals whenever we see pieces of legislation that might reduce our room, or to come up with new rules that we feel will shrink our space. And also with promoting a culture in the society and awareness in the society and the institutions for the role of journalists and journalism.
Right. Now come to another question. What do you think the international associations of journalists, they are doing their job for the training of the journalist and for other, if the journalists in problems, are they playing their right roles?
Well, we have our association, the Macau Portuguese and English Press Association, has joined the International Federation of Journalists recently in November. So we are learning about the actual job and how to strengthen solidarity between different unions in different countries. Well, I can see a concern, and I can see that IFJ has been active in launching campaigns like End Impunity, promoting job security, job safety, promoting and siding with our fellow comrades who are facing very tough situations with regards to layoffs, unemployment, and precarious job situations. So I can see a wave of solidarity, and we are standing with all that with them, of course. Professional training, I see something going on, but I guess more could be done. But I can observe over these months that I can understand, and I've met with the Secretary General and also other people from IFJ, and I can see that they are very committed to playing a role in this field.
What is, in your view, how much training is important for new journalists, especially if he's sent on war zones and conflict areas? Uh, how much contributes its training?
Well, it is. I am not the.
Your voice has gone. Your voice has gone.
Hello.
Uh, hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
continue.
was saying I'm not familiar with how it is to being a journalist in those very tough situations. Um, uh, so I'm lucky, but what I can tell you is that I think we should learn more about the hardship of our colleagues in those places and what could be done. Well, I think well, IFJ has launched this campaign, for instance, to have an international convention on the rights and the conditions and safety of journalists. It is a far-fetched move, but I think it's a move definitely in the right direction. There must be tools, and governments have to be held accountable. They have to treat journalists in a way that, because journalism is a public good. And I can see and observe that pretty much all over the world, we are under threat. We are under threat in Western countries. We're under threat in authoritarian countries. We're under threat in conflict zones. That is even more complicated. So I think, yes, of course, a lot of training, support, and more solidarity, and this has to be a priority. I mean, I think that, for instance, in conflict zones, there are ways of and techniques that one can learn to better protect oneself, and I think that is definitely that is important, very very important.
One important question more. If a journalist with extremist thoughts comes in your rows or come in your office, how would you treat with him and how would you respond to him?
Well, journalists with extremist thoughts.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that in my newsroom, but I will not accept this person as as working for me if I have got the authority. If you say extremist meaning, if you say extremist meaning
in religious
extreme.
in religious contests, in political contests, but extremist thoughts.
Well, it's not just the thoughts. I mean, if he can perform his job according to the
No,
right
Mr. Jose, this is very important. Let me
Yeah.
hear. Let me hear. Uh, uh, One thing is very important, that one is having extremist thoughts. It The thoughts will reflect in his work. So
So I mean that is
I'm talking in that context.
well. What will I do
Yeah.
if I have the power and authority to decide whether this person can work in the newsroom or not? I will definitely not accept this person.
You would not accept. That's good. That's good. That's great.
Now,
Okay.
because of obvious reasons, of course. A journalist and journalism, and you may have a very diverse views, and it's very important to have plural views. But tolerance and mutual respect are fundamental and key areas. Doesn't matter if you're right wing, left wing, if you are what religion you follow. That is something that I don't even need to know or want to know. But tolerance is extremely important.
Okay. Do you think freedom of expression has some borders?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an old debate, of course. There are freedom of expression is the mother of normally we say that freedom of expression is the mother of all freedoms, right? That doesn't mean that there are no boundaries, because if you take anything that is taken to the extreme, will always face boundaries when there's conflict of different fundamental rights. So we have to decide. What is important is that it is a murky and dangerous business, I shall say, whenever governments come up and set up many boundaries and regulations, and even for some apparently good reasons with regards to freedom of expression. But I don't think, I think there are borders. For instance, I give you an example. That extremist journalist, well, if he advocates the Holocaust, if he advocates the execution of Muslims, if he advocates any extreme view, and if he makes this public and does this, I mean, there must be a way to prevent this from happening, in the sense that if he is calling on for mass murder, I mean, this person, there must be a way to have some boundaries there, but of course this should be dealt with carefully, in the sense that.
Very good answer you are giving. Same question I asked Danish journalist, and he responded, no, he should be freed for everything. If there is no freedom of expression in society, means there is no democracy. He responded that nobody should be stopped for doing anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand this view, and I would generally agree, but I guess in some situations, I mean, I mean, there are extreme examples, that we can think of, and especially if it's someone who's apologetic of extremism, and which. But there must be a way to put up a boundary there, especially there's a reason why in democracies you have you don't allow extremist groups to be formed, neo-Nazi groups, Nazi groups who basically advocate violence and mass murder. You can say that. I mean, I'm not saying that you should be arrested for saying that. That's not my point, of course. But if you do it in a way that is a mass communication, I mean, that might not be acceptable. I mean, I think we should devise a way that at the same time protects the greater value, which is freedom of expression and press freedom, of course. But we should also take into account that in some extremist situations there must be an exception to that.
Okay, you are a Portuguese and coming from Portuguese. If you compare Macau from Portuguese, where you find a better journalistic atmosphere?
Portugal or Macau, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not an easy question because I only worked in Portugal when I was very young, so my answer is not so much based on my experience, which was only just, well, when I was a college student, it's different, right? So there are pros and cons in both sides, right? And Portugal is a sound democracy, and you have plural voices, but in terms of the job market, there are a number of problems, So the journalists are constrained by their labor relations, not by obstacles to press freedom or to individual freedoms, etc. In Macau, the job situation is better, sure, but you live in a smaller place, which tends to be more conservative overall. So you may not have the kind of spectrum that you have for debate is narrower. So these are the differences, I shall say. But I've been working here for 15 years, and overall, what I've been experiencing is positive.
In Portugal, is the government standing with the democratic structure? They support journalistic norms, they support expression freedom, they support everything?
Yes. The situation, of course, governments always try to control the agendas and to influence, but I think overall the situation is positive, is good.
Overall is positive.
Yeah, overall is positive, is good. I mean, there is a culture of you know, treasuring and nurturing press freedom, and the problems that we have are related more with the job market than with the, you know, major obstacles put up by the government.
Here in Pakistan, we use a term yellow journalism. Are you aware of that term? And if you're aware, yellow journalism.
I'm not aware.
You're not. I explain it to you.
But
A journalism, a journalism which is used for blackmailing, or used
cool.
for agendas. It is yellow journalism.
Oh.
What do you say about that?
Well, I cannot accept that kind of approach, because, as I said, journalism is for the greater good of the public good, not for other purposes. So, as I said, if journalism is at the service of different powers or interests, and is held hostage by that, and stops performing his duties, then you may say that is no longer journalism, but is something else.
What do you mean by something else? Means forming an agenda?
Yeah, well, agendas are normal, but if you blackmail people, then that's not fair. I mean, everybody's got an agenda. There's no problem with having, I don't see any problem if you make it clear that your newspaper is more conservative or more liberal or this and that. There's no problem. I mean,
okay.
It's actually,
what do you think about WikiLeaks?
We generally like people who leak things, right? Because we would like to have a lot of leakers, so to say, leaking stuff, so we could have big news, and we could, you know, we could have great stories and scoops, etc. So overall, now the question and the problem is, we got to look at WikiLeaks as agenda. WikiLeaks doesn't have a filter, or the filter they have is not monitored, and is not, you know, we cannot be sure about that.
You said WikiLeaks is an agenda. Is it an agenda of CIA?
I don't think so. I don't know.
I'm
not. I don't think so. But the thing is that WikiLeaks is not journalism. To put things out without criteria, without selection, without context, is not journalism. Just information. So journalists are extremely important to play a role there. So WikiLeaks and other sites of the same kind do not replace journalism, and citizens should not be fooled by that. But that doesn't mean that I think WikiLeaks should be shut down. Of course, that's not my point. Actually, it's good that we have WikiLeaks, but we have.
You don't accept that as journalism?
Well, I don't see that as journalism. It's not, because journalism implies the role and the criteria and selection, and to verify information and to provide context, and just to splash things like that. That's not. There's no context. We don't know.
Okay. What do you think about Panama Papers?
Well, I think it's important. I'm not saying that WikiLeaks is not important. WikiLeaks is important, but journalism is very important. The Panama Papers did, I think it was important for allowed us to understand a lot of things. And
is it journalism? Is it journalism?
No, the Panama Papers itself, no. But you had newspapers having access to that firsthand, and they had journalists doing the verification, and what was done by newspapers and media organizations was journalism. But the papers itself, with no context, is information, which is important to be leaked out, of course. But there's an agenda, of course. I mean, the thing is that, but because there is an agenda, that doesn't mean there is a big problem. I mean, everybody's got an agenda, right? So we should not be naive. But the citizens need to know. Transparency is very important. What's the agenda? And journalists should provide context for us to understand the agenda. And if the journalists have an agenda, they may let people know, so people will judge by themselves. But journalists have a special role and a social role, a responsibility towards the citizens, and that
Okay.
responsibility.
Last question about social media. What do
Yes.
you, how do you observe social media, and do you think it's a journalism?
No, I think it's people sharing information. Some people may share some sort of information in a way that is journalism or close to journalism, but social media per se is not journalism. Journalism is a means. It is an instrument for citizens and journalists, and it's great that we have Twitter, Facebook, and it's very important that they remain free, that they remain a valuable tool for citizens to share their views, to report things, but this is not a replace. It does not replace journalists.
Rumors on social media, do you think it is more than news?
Sorry, would you please?
On social media, the rumors are more important than news for the person who is using that social media, doesn't know about journalism.
And that's right, and that's why journalists are so important, and good journalists with strong ethical foundations are so important, because they need to, they should have tools to verify whether something is, this rumor is grounded or some facts, or it's just a rumor. And they have the duty, because they should have a commitment to truth and to
No,
seek truth.
what I mean to ask this question is, the person who is using social media is a layman. He doesn't know about the journalistic norms.
Exactly.
If
Yes.
he if the rumors comes to him, and that rumors he analyzes as or thinks as a news, or takes as news.
Of course.
Oh, do you think it's a positive change in the society?
I think society should, and the different societies and institutions and governments and people who have a responsibility should promote media literacy. So citizens should learn since they are in school. This is for the future generations, and to be educated in a way that they need to learn how to distinguish. I mean, it's not always possible, but to be aware of the sources and the reliability of some information and rumors. So yes, this is a very important problem and a serious problem, because fake news is an epidemic. Fake news destroys journalism and credibility of journalism, and this is a big problem. It's not easy to handle. You know, fake news and rumors can destroy lives of people, can provoke tragedies, right? So this is a very serious problem, but there's no quick fix for this, and it's very worrying, to be honest. I think we need to reflect on that, because we need to ensure freedom of expression and the rights of the people to express their views and to share what they hear. But at the same time, we need to act on educating the people about fake news and rumors. I really don't know how to solve this problem, but this is a big problem.
Okay, one more question, and it is just about your personal life. Are you married?
Yes, I am.
How many children?
Two boys.
What do they do? Are they education? They are in education or doing something else?
Well, they are. My eldest son is 9, and the youngest one is 4.
Oh, means they are
They're,
students.
they're sleeping now.
They're sleeping now, right, right. And how is your personal? Your wife is journalist?
No. She's a high school teacher
Right, right. You married here in Macau, or you married in your own country?
in Macau.
In Macau, you married. Right. That's very good, Mr. Jones. We have a good time, and you responded very.
I hope it was helpful. I mean, I tried to. Your questions are very good and sharp, and I feel that your questions and my answers paved the way for follow-up questions, and some of the issues are very hard to deal with, especially the latest topics that you mentioned, and especially social media and rumors and fake news. We actually, in our association, we have been holding workshops on raising awareness on ways to verify information. I think the younger generations need to be aware of this.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much again, and we'll be in touch in future.